Hello, everybody. It is a great episode 2 week, post-week, whatever you want to call the time that comes right after an episode, after the buzz is strong and everybody's talking a lot about this episode because, hey, it was a good episode. Arguably, it was a great episode. The early returns on IMDb certainly back that up. It's a 9.6 right now, which would tie it for the 4th highest ever episode of Game of Thrones, along with Blackwater and The Children. Those are the ones it's tied with. Unusually for an early season episode, because most of the highest rated episodes are ones that come towards the climax. The climaxes tend to be more popular than the setup episodes, but people really like this episode. I really like this episode. I think most of us did, so we're going to have a lot of good things to say, and of course we'll still have some criticisms as well. There was a major but expected death, a major but surprising death, and a major but expected undeath. There were other deaths, as usual. This is Game of Thrones, after all. But the amount of giants was unusual. Like the first episode, Home, which was the title of this one, was largely focused around events in the north, with King's Landing and an exterior kingdom joined by Braavos and Meereen. In episode 1, the exterior kingdom was Dorne. And this time we got the Iron Islands. Both episodes ended with Jon Snow. Let's talk briefly about the title to the episode. Again, that's Home. How it relates to the episode. Bran sees his home, the past of it anyway. Theon declares that he's going home. Euron arrives home. Jon comes home from death.
And of course, Cersei is stuck at home, and Mira doesn't feel at home. So, hello and welcome to another episode of History of Westeros. We are joined this week, as we are every week in our Book to Show episodes, by Lady Gwyn and Yolkboy of Radio Westeros.
Welcome back, guys.
Hey, good to be here.
Yeah, really glad to be back.
I assume you guys liked the episode more than episode 1, or did you maybe like episode 1 more?
I think this was the best episode in a while. It's definitely my highest favorability rating in quite a while.
Cool.
I agree with you, as evidenced by my presence on this episode.
What about you, Yolkboy?
Yeah, I agree with Lady Gwyn. It's not only the best of the two, but it's the best for a while. So it was really good, quite fulfilling.
Well, yeah, it's good to have Ashaya back for this episode as well. Some additional insight, always very good. We're going to do a bit of a quasi-roundtable style episode. Ashaya's going to moderate, and she'll give her own answers as well. Not everyone's going to answer every question, because frankly, we don't have time for that. There is a lot to talk about. This episode really spawned a lot of discussion. There's a lot of questions that are posed because of this. And of course, because this is a Book to Show episode, we're really going to hammer away at how these plot developments may imply the future of what's going to happen in the Winds of Winter and all that. And we'll also talk about what we think won't happen in the show that won't happen in the books based on the show, et cetera, et cetera. So we'll try to clear all that up as much as possible. Along the same lines as having so much to talk about in this episode, we've gotten a ton of feedback, comments on YouTube, emails, messages on Patreon, etc. Frankly, we're a bit behind on all that. There's so much talk about this episode that we can't get to it all. So I just want to let everyone know, if you've sent us an email, we've absolutely read it. We've absolutely taken into account some of the questions you've all have asked have made it into this episode. But because we can't respond to everything, I just want you all to know that we definitely read every email. We definitely take everything into account. We look at all the comments. We just, if we responded to everything, well, we wouldn't have time to make all these episodes. So that's just the way it is. That's just the bottom line. So we try to respond when we can, but right now this is the high season. This is the busy season. So with that said, what am I wasting time for? Let's get into it. Let's talk about the North.
So we start off, of course, with this flashback of Winterfell. This is in the late 270s-ish, and I think we all thought it was awesome to see the Stark kids. Lyanna was a standout there, and she was played by Cordelia Hill, Westerman bastard.
Yeah, they're really going within the schema to get their actresses these days. I like that.
Yeah, Lyanna was immediately shown to be very bold, and she really steals the scene there, something we can guess was on purpose from the directors because she might be a memorable character. And straight away we're told Ned never talks about her. So there's obviously some secret there. And I think I can speak on behalf of all RLJ fans When I say that I love seeing Lyanna for the first time, and it was very exciting.
Yeah, I mean, we don't get to see her really in the books at all. We hear about her. Ned's got that little vision of her, the dream of her dying in her bed, but you don't really see her. So actually having her on screen, I gotta admit, it was kind of an emotional moment. I mean, as far as Game of Thrones can be, it shows how deeply these things are in our subconscious when you can get an emotional reaction to a character appearing on screen. And it's not even like she has like one line, and it's still like, wow, that was just awesome. And it fits, I think, our feelings were kind of matched up with how Bran felt about it too.
And he wanted a little longer.
He did. We wanted it a little longer. That's right. Actually, hell, we wanted a lot longer.
Yeah.
There's some neat parallels in the scene there. There's a parallel with Ned telling Benjen to keep his shield up, and even the way he holds his, grabs his neck and tells, like to be emphatic about it.
It's word for word.
It's word for word the same as what Jon says to Ollie when he's training him. So that had to be on purpose. Pretty sneaky, nicely done, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yep. There was also echoes of Ned and Kat watching their kids sparring from season 1 when you see the three-eyed raven and Bran standing on that little balcony, same kind of framing.
Yeah, we also saw a nice little cameo there from a young Ser Roderick. Some people might have thought that was Brandon. It wasn't. You could tell by the mutton chops, and he had the exact same belt. I mean, obviously, it's been loosened a bit once he gets older, but it's definitely Ser Roderick.
Yeah, that was nice. That was a very nice touch. I think this scene was just really great. It might have been cool to see Brandon, but he was probably, timeline-wise, he would have been with the Riswells by then, assuming book canon there. That's when he would have been fostered over there, so it would make sense for him not to be in Winterfell. Rickard might have been there, but he just wasn't in that scene.
Yeah, we did see Mid-Nan.
Mid-Nan.
She looked real good.
She does.
Same outfit, pretty much.
Yeah, this is well done. Really good attention to detail there, I thought, in that scene. The show gets... people criticize it for not paying attention to detail in some places or missing nuances of characters. And since we criticize that sometimes, it's only fair to point out when they get it right. I think they nailed it with this one. What about Willis and Hodor? Willis / Hodor.
Yeah, it was really nice to see Hodor when he was young, wasn't it? And I did notice that Hodor already had that scar on his head. He's got this kind of scar just on the side of his temple. So that can't correlate to what happened to him to make him Hodor.
I wonder if is there any chance it's related to the actor? Christian Aaron actually has a tattoo on his forehead.
Yeah, that is why he has the scar, but it would have made...
They could still fit it into
If it was because it was a knock on the head, you would think that they wouldn't have given him the scar right then.
Right.
But there is a theory that people have been talking about a bit here, which is that maybe Benjen injures Hodor, or Willis at this point, and that's why Benjen takes the black. We've seen it commented quite a bit, so we thought we'd throw it out.
Yeah, it's certainly a possibility. That might seem like a kind of a mild reason to dedicate your life to the Night's Watch. But if he was, he's already a Stark. Starks sometimes take the black. It's kind of their duty. Maybe he's already leaning that direction, and that just kind of was extra motivation for him, extra incentive. Hard to say. There's also this interesting talk about how he has Giant's blood. If he learned to fight, he'd be unstoppable. I don't know that he literally has Giant's blood, but the reference is cool, and it makes you think. And there's more Giant. There's actually a lot of Giant talk this episode in general. You wonder, did he learn to fight? Was he unstoppable? Did he take a blow to the head?
That's what I'm wondering. That you see Bran's face there when that line is delivered, and 'cause that's something that he knows pretty well, obviously, having taught Hodor to fight. But I can't shake the feeling that that's going to be important to Hodor's backstory.
Yeah, you wonder if he actually gets into the war, or if it's some sort of training accident. I've heard another theory that maybe Robert Baratheon is responsible, that he whacks him over the head. He's trying to impress Lyanna or something.
Yeah, I saw another theory that it was Rhaegar during when Hodor's around, when Lyanna takes off with Rhaegar, and Rhaegar hits him for some reason. It's just another theory I've been seeing.
Yeah, interesting.
A lot of Hodor theories.
There are a lot of Hodor theories, more so than ever now that we've got evidence of what he was like. That was kind of surprising. So Bran also says that you finally show me a vision I want to see, etc., and then he takes him away. The interesting takeaway there, I think that it shows that he's still got a ways to go. Three-eyed crow, raven, blood raven, three-eyed blood raven. Is still in control. He's the one guiding the visions. Bran is not having the visions on his own. He didn't pick this vision out himself. I think that's an important little detail there. It shows kind of how Bran still has a ways to go in his training. He's kind of like Arya. He's just taken a while to get the training, get through this training stage.
Moving on, though, we have this line from Bloodraven where he references being under the sea, and we've gotten a lot of comments. People seem to be reminded of Patchface. I think it is possible that they were referencing Patchface. I don't really think so, and I think that Yolkboy has a bit to say about this.
Yeah, some people think that this means that Patchface's visions, when he says under the sea in the books, means that he's talking about the past. I can see why people think this, but you've got to remember the books are the books and the show is the show. So I think that, at best it's just a kind of nod. I really don't think in the books when Patchface is talking about under the sea that he's talking about the past. I think there is evidence that Patchface does see the future, and the one clear one is when he sees the Red Wedding, for example. And another point on this scene, Bran being tempted to stay connected to the past really reminded me of the books in his Wolf Dreams, where Jojen several times reminds him not to get too deep in because he's going to lose himself. Here's a quote from the books: "Remember yourself, or the wolf will consume you. When you join, it is not enough to run and hunt and howl in summer's skin." And funnily enough, Bran's apprenticeship under his master is in opposition to Arya's with her master. Bran is being taught not to lose himself, to keep himself, by the three-eyed blood raven. Where Arya, on the other hand, is being taught to completely lose herself and her identity. So I think it's a really nice contrast between those two.
And to add to that contrast, that's a really great point, by the way, Arya is resisting that, whereas Bran is the one who's giving in. It's kind of like they're being told to do the opposite of what their natural inclinations do. Arya's trying to stay herself, even though she's slowly relenting and realizing that she's going to have to do that. But we all know she's kind of hanging on to her past a bit with Needle and all that. Whereas Bran, his past is part of this. It's contained in this environment that he's supposed to not get too lost in.
I'd say he is still resisting Bloodraven there.
He's resisting Bloodraven,
but into it, but they're both resisting what they're being advised to do.
That's true, and that's a good point.
So moving on, another very exciting thing that happened in this episode, it was very exciting for me at least, I figure it's exciting for most people, is that Leaf was recast. The new actress is Kay Alexander. What? And I just want to say that Leaf, I just want to say it's been such a relief that she turned over a new leaf. Yeah.
That was a lot of puns all together.
Thanks to Aziz and I. We wrote that together. But she did look really awesome.
Yeah, that was cool.
With those eyes and the hair. It's just really cool. I had one question, though. Leaf. So that is Leaf. She confirmed that it's Leaf. In the previous season, in Season 4, the Child of the Forest was also confirmed to be Leaf. So I guess they learned that we didn't like that Leaf, and they fixed it.
Apparently there's some budgeting issue.
Yes.
They ran out of budget in that episode, that season, and so they had to do this other version. But if we want to try to explain it in canon to make it make sense, I guess we can say that she was younger then, and she went through a growth spurt. She was a child of the
over all
Children of the
years
Forest.
she's been alive. This
yeah, that was out of the hundreds of years of life. That was the important year. Yeah.
But we can definitely agree that we're grateful that they fixed this. It was way more creepy.
Yeah. She's an adult of the forest, or at least a teenager of the forest. A tween of the forest.
But in that Leaf scene, it wasn't just all being, wow, look, Leaf looks cool. Leaf had a pretty interesting conversation with Mira there.
Very telling. She points out that he's going to need you when he leaves. He's not going to stay here forever, which to a lot of book readers was a big surprise. Not that we necessarily have to assume this is what's going to happen in the books, but a lot of people thought that Bran was going to stay there in the cave forever, that he was going to become part of the trees. I admit, I consider myself in that group. I thought there was a very strong possibility. I was married to the idea, just like Bran isn't necessarily going to be married to a tree. But quite blatantly, it's pointed out that he will be leaving. Of course, book, maybe not, but I think there's a strong chance. It's a pretty big plot point to change. So I think we might expect that he's going to leave in the show or in the books as well. And I think that's a good thing as far as Mira and Hodor, because if Bran's going to stay in the cave, Mira and Hodor are kind of pointless. And you know what happens to pointless characters? A lot of times they die. So if he's got to go back out in the wilderness, go back into the world, they're going to be with him, which means they're going to be around with him. So that bodes well for their at least immediate future.
So I wanted to bring up a question that was on my mind, at least, was how long has Bran been in the cave? We had that whole season where he was off. He wasn't in the show at all in season 5. And so the biggest thing I could think of to date things was Walda's pregnancy. And she announces her pregnancy in season 5, episode 5. So assuming Bran went in the cave before she announced her pregnancy then, in season 4, it's been as much as a year. Maybe at least 7 to 8 months minimum, basically, which is a really long time, and I can see why Mira is so depressed and bored and despondent.
She's really got nothing to do. Food probably stinks there, too.
So, do we have any other thoughts on Bran, Bloodraven, Mira?
I think we're just getting started with all that.
Yeah, I suppose you're
There's
right.
probably a lot we could say, but we should probably move on unless anyone has anything crucial there.
Nothing crucial.
I think we're good then.
Yeah, we'll just
right,
wait and see what happens next. It's going to be great. Can't wait.
So we're going to move on to the wall. First, we're going to focus on the wildling arrival.
Yeah, 1-1, and Tormund showing up wasn't as bloody as a lot of people maybe expected it would be. Could be very different in the books. That's something that could be different. I think there's room for a difference there. I like the nod to Sir Patrick there, even though there was only 2 or 3 people that were killed. I think it was just 2 people killed in that scene. One of them was splattered against the wall. In fact, I think there's a lot of nods to the books in this episode. A lot of very slender, sneaky references to the books in here in this episode, and that's one that's a little more obvious, I think. But I like that they did that. There's a couple of nice little zingers, some decent dialogue there. Alistair Thorne saying, "You traitor, you know, we've held the wall this long, blah blah blah." And the only traitor is those who stabbed the Lord Commander. And Tormund says, "Yeah, you're the one who lost the wall. You were in charge. The second you took over, you lost the wall, buddy."
One thing that was really I thought was cool about this scene. The episode description says the Night's Watch stands behind Thorne, and before we watched it, I said to Yolkboy, "What do you want to bet that refers to the Night's Watch just kind of standing there when the wildlings show up?" Which was exactly what they did. I thought that was pretty funny.
They stood behind Thorne.
Literally, just stood behind him.
Very clever.
But that comment by Thorne that you brought up, holding the wall against the wildlings for thousands of years, really highlights how out of touch the Night's Watch has become, doesn't it? Because we think the true purpose of the wall is not to hold the wall against the wildlings, but to keep the others out. So he's just proved that he's got it all wrong when he says that.
And so Thorne and Ollie and others are locked up. Big question, what's going to happen? What is going to happen with those guys? Are they... I kind of don't think they're just going to be executed. That seems extreme for Jon, especially because there's so many of them. The Night's Watch is just... their strength is dwindling. There's so few of them. Can he really afford to kill these guys, even though they're one of the most treasonous things you can imagine? I don't know. Do you guys have any thoughts on that, or is that just a wait-and-see kind of situation?
I agree that I think there's just too many of them. I don't think there's going to be a mass execution.
Yeah, I don't see Jon doing that. I see him maybe trying to find, some way around it, some poetic justice or something there. But yeah, I'm really interested to see what happens with Ollie.
Yeah, with all these, kind of rough it would be. I mean, you have Othel, Yarwick, Bodmar, like the three, all of the second in command, third in command, fourth command, whatever order you want to put them. All of them were on the side of
it's not
traitors.
Yeah, he needs some creative punishment. Like, you guys have to hang out with a wildling. We're going to assign each of you to a buddy.
Maybe it'll be like what happens in the book, where John sends Thorin out as a ranger, just puts him in danger, and says, "All right, well, you got to."
Yeah.
It'll be maybe explained a little different. It's like, well, you got to prove that you are still loyal. This is your punishment. We're going to let you continue to be a brother, but you're going to be in the forefront of the danger. Yeah, maybe that might be a little compromise.
Mm-hmm.
All right, should we move on? Let's stay at the north. Talk about the resurrection a bit. What did you guys think of Mel's despair? I thought it was different for her.
Oh, it was so different, and I mean, I kind of thought it was amusing. She had a couple of good lines there. She was really snarky to Davos when he came in and said, "I assume you know why I'm here." I will after you tell me. I've never seen her be sarcastic or anything like that. So it was both amusing and moving for the actress as well. One thought I had is that her despair is based on her visions failing to come true, but Davos is standing there kind of offering her the solution. He's telling her, we should resurrect Jon Snow, and she's just like, nah, I can't do anything now. My visions didn't come true. But he's giving her the answer right there. So
that's true.
Not sure if that had anything to do with why she ended up doing it, if she made the connection. But.
So let's move on to the ritual itself. And now, I'm sure you've seen that David Peterson released the translation of the prayer that Melisandre recites. But if you haven't, I think Yolkboy had an interest in reading it for everyone.
Yeah, I got it from, that was it. It was David Peterson's blog. He's the one who actually made the Valyrian language, and it's in High Valyrian. It says, "We ask the Lord to shine his light and lead a soul out of darkness. We beg the Lord to share his fire and light a candle that has gone out. From darkness, light. From ashes, fire. From death, life." And I went back and checked, and it's kind of similar to what Thoros said when he brought back Beric. When was that? That must have been season 3 or 4. I can't remember now. But it's not exactly the same wording, but it's a kind of similar sentiment. And speaking of Thoros, he did seem to have a similar experience of not really fully knowing what he was doing when he brought back Beric. Is very clear about that. It was almost down to luck kind of thing. You have to wonder why resurrections are becoming easier at this point in time and at this moment in history. Has magic not only been affected by the rebirth of the dragons, but could the others, the reemergence of the others, be something to do with it as well, who are obviously the chief resurrectors in the story?
Yeah, and it's important to point out where else there's walking bodies going around. I mean, Robert Strong, the Mountain, that's another resurrection that maybe wouldn't have worked 5 years ago, for example. Maybe that's what, maybe Qyburn had tried before and it just didn't work, and now it works, because it is interesting. Thoros and Mel, they had no idea what they just tried it. Thoros wasn't even trying. He was just doing the same thing he always does. And like, lo and behold, this person woke up after I did the same prayer he's done a lot of times. So I like that. I really like that the show is keeping the instability, the mystery of magic. That same concept is applied here. I like that a lot. It's just you just don't know. We don't know how it works, and there's no manual. There's no guide to it. It just sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but it seems to be working big time right now. What about some of the differences we expect in the books here? What about Ghost? Do we think that Ghost is going to be maybe a part of that in the books, or what about resurrections in general?
Are you asking me?
Yeah, I'm asking you.
Asking me. Well, I was a fan of John Warging Ghost. I still think I am a fan of it. I'm slightly less a fan of it after this. As much as I can't help it, it affected me a little bit. I still lean towards him warging into Ghost, though. for me.
Okay. I am not sure. I do think Ghost will be involved in the process. I think that's the whole point of Varamir and all that was in the books. And it's the stuff you can't do on the show because it's all very internal. It's all in his head. It's these strange things that are kind of hard to bring onto the screen.
That's a good point. It would be harder to show on the screen, although they have done seeing it from the wolf's eyes before when we saw Bran looking through Summer.
That's true. We kind of thought maybe that would happen with Ghost, but it didn't, so that's that.
We said last week, John hasn't even been established as a warg of any kind, so it would have been a Deus Ex Machina for sure. Without any groundwork, it becomes a Deus Ex Machina because it's from nowhere. So
I agree. Yeah.
That's a good point.
What about the resurrection yourself?
What about it? Are you asking if I should ask the question we have?
Yes.
This is a question that we've seen a lot of articles about. We've seen it asked a lot. Is Jon's resurrection a cheap device? Lady Gwyn, why don't you start us off?
Well, I don't know. I feel like, as happy as I was to see it, kind of, that it felt a bit rushed. I'm not sure it was entirely convincing storytelling. We're pretty sure we know what Davos's motivation was, but I don't think it was that well communicated. I mean, so we're kind of left to assume that why Davos would want him resurrected, and Mel might have been motivated to try and revive her visions, and the thing I said earlier, like maybe she realized that if she brought him back to life, her visions might come true, or maybe she was just trying to help out Davos. So it just wasn't very explicit. So I think they could have done a little more work with that.
Yeah.
I can see why. I can see why show-only watchers might be thinking that this is a cheap device. Bringing back people from the dead on TV really runs that risk for sure, and you can't, give Game of Thrones a pass for that because it's a show we love. However, this isn't your usual soap opera. We did see White in the very first scene, so resurrection and that kind of magic was established really early on. We had Beric, and also the Mountain being brought back from the dead too. However, in all cases of resurrection so far, there's been a cost to the resurrected. And George has actually said that this is how his resurrections function. He likes this device, where they come back and they lose something. Now, I think if they want to avoid Jon's resurrection coming off like a cheap plot device, they really need to exhibit some kind of change or cost for Jon. In the books, I'm really sure George will show this somehow, but we'll have to wait and see how the TV show handle this. But I think overall it's a reasonable enough concern from critics, and we can just hope that in the upcoming episodes that it's handled accordingly by the directors.
Yes, I hope so as well. So on that subject, how will Jon be changed? Aziz, what do you think?
I think that I like the idea that he's going to be a little more, maybe a little wilder, maybe a little less forgiving, but that doesn't work with the idea of him forgiving Alliser and Ollie, for example. So in order to do, this is kind of an opportunity for him. He's back from the dead, and his agenda that he's trying to push, which I think most of us agree is the right agenda to push, as far as because we are a bit more omniscient than the characters in this story. We have more information than they do, so we understand the threats sort of like Jon does. And so I think that he might be even more determined. He might be willing to learn from his mistakes. I think he may understand that he didn't lead the Night's Watch properly. He didn't explain why these things are important. He didn't understand how biased they are against the wildlings and how that had to be addressed. And so maybe he'll just be smarter. If it's that simple, but it could be darker. It could be Night's King-ish. I don't know. I think it'll be different in the books, though.
I think it's pretty obvious how he's changed. He's going to have a little bit shorter left side of his beard and a little bit shorter hair. And some scars. Pretty big change.
He'll have holes in him, yeah. He'll need a new shirt.
So another question people might be wondering about is what the reaction of the wildlings is going to be. Well, there's a little bit of something that gives us a clue as to how they'll react in the preview for next week's episode, so stay tuned for that post-credits.
Yeah, as usual, we'll be talking about things that are in the next on Game of Thrones, Episode 3, anything we learned.
Episode description.
All that stuff is after the credits. You can avoid that if you want to, but if you want to dive into the spoiler talk, we got you covered after the credits, so end of the episode. Stay tuned for that. But yeah, how will the wildlings react to this?
Yeah, it is a big question. And another big question is, how will Ollie and Alliser react?
They'll be like, "What? We killed you." Nothing works.
What do you think, yolkboy?
Well, John might come back, after experiences at Hardhome, thinking, I've got to act for the greater good. I can't be getting tied up in kind of personal quarrels. I think that's, a decent enough angle. And so he might try and kind of forgive Alliser, Ollie, and all the others who were, implemented to be part of his stabbing. He might be bigger than that now. He might be thinking, right, my mission is to, unite people now. I can't be squabbling. And it crossed my mind that it could parallel Dany potentially forgiving the Dothraki who took her captive. There might be an emerging theme of finding common cause with old enemies and focusing on the greater tasks and battles ahead.
I like that thought a lot, especially because if that's happening, well, we're well on our way to that, because as we've talked about at length in these first 2 episodes, there's a lot of infighting within each kingdom. There's just rulers getting stabbed by their families left and right, or thrown off of bridges, etc. It's happening everywhere. So with all this infighting, yeah, if it starts to coalesce into people realizing that they need to work together, that would fit, and it's certainly needed, because yeah, I don't think Westeros can beat the others if they're all just fighting themselves. The North in general, not just Alliser and Ollie's reaction to Jon's raising, I think is interesting how everyone else will react, because most people don't even know he was stabbed. This whole saga of his death and rebirth was pretty quick. Not exactly time for word to spread. Maybe some of the wildlings spread the word when Ed came to them, but other than that, it's not like Alliser was going to go tell the world that they killed their own Lord Commander. Roose Bolton told us why you don't go around doing that. So it's interesting for me to think, what happens if this is the rumor that spreads, is that Jon Snow was killed and brought back from the dead. And I think that the way gossip works in Westeros, that's the kind of thing that people would talk about regardless. But the fact that it's a Stark, a son of a major house, I think that actually makes the rumor juicier, which means it'll spread more. Just hearing that, oh, the dead are walking again, that's just going to sound like fancy to people. But when you have a specific name attached to it, and it's a somewhat famous name from a famous family, I think that gives the rumor more legs, and that would be ironic to me if the thing that gets people to pay attention to the threat in the North isn't the actual threat, but the bringing back of the man who's most in the vanguard of facing that threat. So that would be kind of a backwards way of getting things aligned, but I could see it happening. So let's take a short break, and we'll be back with more on Jon. There's still a lot to talk about with Jon and the implications for the books in particular here.
So another question that we all have on our mind is, will Jon be escaping his vows?
Real quick, if he does, if he's not the Lord Commander, does that mean Ed will be the Lord Commander? He's kind of taken the lead back there. He's, led the wildlings over there. He'd have to be a top pick, I think. None of the traitorous guys that stabbed Jon would even be considered, I would think. So.
I don't think we know anyone else's name. So.
Here's that cook, that badass cook that fought.
Right. Three-Finger Hob. I don't know if he's named in the show.
Yeah.
Well, I definitely think that Jon is going to, get out of his vows. His focus is obviously going to be elsewhere now. Family in the short term, I have my guess, but obviously the big picture, the others.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Also tied to this, so do we think that Jon is going to be a follower of the Lord of Light now? Whether you think it'll mean he forsakes the old gods, whether he worships them both, or what? What do you think, Yolkboy?
Well, it's a really interesting question, and I personally don't think that Jon would forsake his old gods. I think they're a big part of who he is. But he might feel somewhere that he does owe a certain debt to R'hllor, and this could manifest perhaps in the way that he now treats Mel. Rather than a religious conversion, he might be more interested in the powers Mel possesses via her god, which, like I said, he might be very grateful for.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that what we saw from the books is when Stannis presented him with that choice of to take Winterfell, it's like, I'll name you Lord Stark, but the price was burning the heart tree and all that, which was, and when he sees Ghost and realizes, no, I'm part of the old gods. So that, I do think that will make him consider that. But I agree with you. I don't think he can give up the old gods. But maybe he becomes kind of like Victarion, where he just honors all the gods, and it's like, well, now I've seen that they're legit. I can't just continue to be, I mean, it's not monotheistic, but you know what I mean.
So we'll find out pretty soon how Jon's going to react to all this, but let's think a little bit about how Melisandre is going to react to this. Do we think her faith is going to be restored? Lady Gwyn.
Well, I'm really interested to see what she thinks of this thing coming from herself, because remember, with Thoros, that she was impressed by the power, but she was more puzzled. I mean, it didn't seem to affect her conviction at all. She was equally as sure of herself before as after when she saw what was happening with Thoros. So now that she's managed to pull this off as well, I just wonder, I'm interested to see how that'll affect.
Yeah, maybe she'll be like, I'm so sorry, I never should have doubted you, R'hllor, all along, you've been with me. Or maybe she'll feel like, yeah, it was within me. Maybe this is not some other power. I kind of think the former is more likely than the latter. Yeah, that's just to hear that was right, too.
She's going to be insufferable, yes.
Yeah, so I guess there's at least one other big question that comes out of this.
Is Melisandre going to try to resurrect anyone else in the future?
Those implications are massive, right? Like, there's so many possibilities. You can be like, hey, wait, let's find Stannis' body. Or Shireen's devils will be like, Shireen, Mel's like, actually, about that.
So much.
In order to resurrect a body, you're going to have a body. And yeah, he was perhaps a little too zealous there. So lots of possibilities. I don't know. Immediately, I can't think of anyone who would just immediately, well, we got to resurrect that guy.
But if someone dies in the future, and Melisandre's around, she might just resurrect them.
Dolorous Ed, for example. We got to keep him around. He's feeling safer than ever. Indestructible Lord Commander Dolorous Ed, with the backing of the Red Woman.
I'd like to imagine one dying and bringing him back.
Oh, another undead giant.
Yeah.
A giant in the service of R'hllor. That sounds scary.
So I think that's enough on the resurrection, at least until we move on to our post-credits discussion. So let's move on to the scene with Sansa, Theon, Podrick, and Brienne. And I think the biggest question on all of our minds here is, why didn't Brienne say who Arya was with? Because Podrick says that it's the Hound when Brienne runs into them, so Brienne definitely knows.
Yeah, she didn't know at first. She was like, oh, hey, fellow traveler with Arya, and then Podrick is like, that's Sandor Clegane. And she's like, oh. So, yeah, we know that for sure that she knows who that was.
Yeah. Well, it was, obviously there was dramatic tension. I felt it when Sansa got up to leave to walk over to Theon. I was like, no, don't go, stay there. Keep talking about that guy, because you forgot to ask. But, yeah, it was very frustrating. Just hope it'll come up again, of course.
I think maybe it's just she didn't want to scare Sansa. She's like, well, doesn't that just make her
she doesn't
fear?
know about Sansa's relationship with Sandor. She doesn't know that Sansa spent any time with him, really.
Exactly. So it's just like, oh, by the way, she was with this murderous, guy, murderous, dangerous guy that has this reputation.
Yeah.
It's like, that's not going to
Westeros.
That's not going to give Sansa confidence. That's just going to make her worry more. So I kind of see that might be it. But again, kind of like Davos's motivation for bringing back Jon, which is that he recognizes that only Jon can unite the wildlings and the Watch. So that's really important, but that's not spelled out. So I think that's what you were saying earlier, Lady Gwyn, about it maybe being a little bit bad storytelling because they didn't make that clear. It wasn't clear to us until we all sat together here and worked on this episode and talked it through. We're like, oh yeah,
it's another one of those where just a line would have really fixed it. If when Sansa goes over to Theon, Podrick and Brienne are standing there, and Podrick says, "Why didn't you tell her?"
Yeah.
And Brienne says that better not to frighten her or make her lose hope or any number. Literally 2 lines.
2 lines. You're right.
Yeah.
And there's so many. And it's so important because book readers, us book readers, we get kind of wrapped up in what we expect. It happens a lot that people just default back to why didn't they do this the way it happened in the books. And sometimes it's a good complaint, but sometimes they have a compelling reason for doing it the way they did in the show that makes a lot of sense from a show production standpoint. But to me, this is a small failing on their part, is they need to clarify these things, partly because of to work with the expectations that other people have already.
And yeah, as Lady Gwyn mentioned, I think there were multiple moments throughout this episode where just the tiniest line would have clarified it to my satisfaction.
Yeah. So maybe just a line here or there would fix a lot of things. But
in this case, they could have set up, what's coming very easily. Reminded people there are going to be show watchers that maybe you've forgotten about the Hound, or maybe not forgotten about him, but might need to be reminded about him.
That'll be fun.
Yeah, I'm very excited to see people's reaction to his appearance.
Yeah.
So also in this, Sansa does confirm that the Wall is their destination. Just a tiny note.
Yeah. Whether that changes en route or something, I don't know. I'm guessing it'll be what happens. I'm guessing they go there, and then from there, who knows?
I think maybe she might make it there.
Oh, I do think she'll make it there. I just think that after that, I'm saying I don't know what happens after that.
Yeah. There was this, another really touching moment between Sansa and Theon, which, I love these little moments. She suggested Theon that he should join the Night's Watch, and he's, to get his sins forgiven. He just doesn't think he deserves to be forgiven. He doesn't want to be forgiven, which I thought was really interesting. He says there's no way, there can be no redemption. So I thought that was an interesting moment. And then, of course, he's gone home, so gets back to the theme of the episode.
By the way, there's a lot of people that think that there might be an alternate explanation to what home means here. I honestly don't get that. I don't know where else he could be going.
People think that Winterfell is his home.
Right, and I don't understand how that could be the case, because he certainly by himself isn't going to be able to take on Ramsay Bolton.
I think they're thinking that he's suicidal.
Oh.
I think that they're thinking that he doesn't want forgiveness, and he just wants to go to his home, and he realizes that his home is Winterfell.
Okay. I can buy that.
Theory. I think he's headed towards the Iron Islands.
I do too. Yeah.
But
I think if he was suicidal, he wouldn't throw himself into Ramsay's hands. That would be death by torture. That wouldn't just be death. That would be
not death. You just keep him alive.
I don't think he hates himself that much.
Yeah.
No, probably not. I did have a thought. I wondered if he would catch wind. Something that we're going to talk about in the after credits. So if he catches wind of things happening at Winterfell and he feels like he can maybe redeem himself by going back there to do something.
Interesting. Okay, well, we'll discuss that more at the post-credits. That's a good idea.
So let's move on to the Boltons.
Perfect timing for that.
Now, there were some major northern houses mentioned here. Karstark, Manderley, and Umber, and of course we were all cheering for the Manderley inclusion.
Yes, very good to hear the Manderley inclusion. We were all sweating that a little bit. They were at the Red Wedding, but all you got was a large man with a mermaid pin. That's not exactly a lot of Manderley action, so hopefully there's more to come there. We guessed last episode that Roose and Ramsay would come into conflict, and we certainly lean towards Ramsay being the victor in that because of his appearance in the trailers later in the season. That whole big battle at the end of the season, that certainly appears to involve him. So it didn't seem, and of course with the pattern elsewhere, every house was fighting amongst itself, and this just seemed likely. I think the surprise was that it happened so soon. Maybe we shouldn't have been surprised that it happened so soon, because this plot, a lot of things are moving quickly. certainly Walda's pregnancy moved quickly.
I think the biggest surprise to me was just that Karstark was in on it. He was definitely in on it. If it wasn't clear enough by the fact that he had stone face, no reaction, just like the Martell guards made that clear to us by the reaction, it was made definitely clear because Ewan Rian confirmed that Harold Karstark was in on it, and Ramsay's been planning this.
Mm-hmm.
You wonder if he would have done it even if the child was a girl.
Right. Just made his move. Yeah.
Maybe that's what he was weighing. He was like, well, I'm not going to do this if it's a girl, but maybe he's just like, look, she's going to have a boy eventually. They're going to keep having. She's a Frey, you know, that kind of bias and superstition they have, and it's like she's going to just keep popping out kids. She's a Frey after all, so he's going to be. Maybe he's thinking that. So I better just take care of this now.
Roose has one of the best lines in the books about Lady Walda. If Lady Walda pops out sons the way she pops in tarts.
The dread for it will soon be overrun with bolsters.
That's so funny that you quoted that. I was just about to quote it too, because that made me think of that.
That's one of my favorite lines.
And then he says, but Ramsay will kill them all, of course, but that's for the better. Like, what? Of course. He's just like nonchalant. He's like, I won't care. I'll be dead. Like, what difference does it make to me? Like, man, that is a cold man.
Yeah, he is. Did you guys notice the irony of the Karstarks talking about how they abandoned King Robb because he killed his father, but he stood there stone-faced watching Ramsay kill his own father.
Yeah, it's like it wasn't. He didn't slay my kid.
Kid slaying is cool as long as it's not my kid.
And that's, of course, they did sort of address the need for Ramsay to not admit to the realm. He points out that he makes the Maester lie and says it was poison.
Right.
Which I guess people will believe that. No,
and then Lady Walda and
what happened to her? Yeah. Well, they don't necessarily know about the baby.
They don't know about the baby, but Lady Walda's disappeared.
Lady Walda disappeared.
Lord Walder can't be happy when he learns this.
Yeah, I gotta agree with that. I think that might be one of the first things that comes up when Lord Walder gets reintroduced this season. He's like, got to throw away a line. He's like, my daughter is dead up there or something.
I
haven't heard from her.
20 others.
So, Lady Gwyn, you noticed something else about a parallel with Roose and. Speaking
karma.
of the Karstarks and Robb.
So we're gonna go from irony to karma. The Roose is stabbed in the heart, and it's set up very much like the Roose stabbing Robb. I mean, the framing of the scene and everything. It's a little different placement of the. But
no one was sending their regards, but
no.
He stabs him in the belly in this, but he does point the knife up, doesn't it? So you're saying it was
stabbed through the heart, and just a hug and some kind words, and so.
I thought there was another sneaky thing in this scene just before Ramsay gets the news, or everyone gets the news about the child. Roose is complaining to Ramsay about his plan. He's like, look, if you behave like a mad dog, you'll be taken out back and slaughtered like a pig or something to that effect. And then immediately Roose is stabbed about 2 minutes later. I wonder if that's foreshadowing. I think in the books we kind of expect the karmic way for Ramsay to go down would be his own dogs turning on him, which is certainly possible. There's a lot of ways he could go down. But I think that's interesting. I wonder if he's just going to be killed ignominiously after failing, after he loses his power, he loses his authority, and he's just put down like an animal without any fanfare or any great last stand or anything like that.
I picture Jon taking him out and beheading him like Ned did to the poor lady.
Yeah, that'd be cool. But it could go the same way. Maybe his hounds will get him in the show too. That could happen still, kind of the way what he did to Lady Walda and her child could still happen to him.
Yeah, let's hope so.
My tinfoil theory is that the Hound himself kills Ramsay because he's a dog, and doing it for Sansa or Arya, something like that. I don't know. It's a stretch, but hey, it's worth throwing out there. What about Roose's death in the books? I think that's a huge question we have. Is it gonna be similar or not? For all we know, he's already dead in the books. Like the Pink Letter, some people thought, well, maybe this is indication that Ramsay's already done away with his father, and we just the North hasn't gotten wind of it yet. For all we know, that's already happened. But Ramsay isn't nearly as a central character in the books as he is in the show. He's like the replacement for Joffrey. He's like the new... Yeah. When Joffrey was gone, immediately Ramsay stepped forward as the psychopath guy.
I've read multiple interviews all about how he's the replacement for Joffrey. Interviews with you and Rian.
So
I think he actually got voted above Joffrey on like most hated villains recently.
Nice. Well done. Well done for him. So to me, it says that alone, just the difference in how central Ramsay is as a character in the show versus the books, that says that this will go very differently in the books. To me, it doesn't have to go very differently. I just think that's a strong indication that it will, because of how they've made him such a central character. And he's an important character in the books for sure, but he's not, like Stannis or Robb or somebody big. All of whom can die and probably will die. Yeah.
I think in the show for sure. You see him mourning, and lots of scenes with him alone, and yeah.
Yeah, it's true. They give him more of a rounded character too. He has no tender moments in the book. There's no like Ramsay feeling, grieving over his dead. He doesn't have a love in the book. It's funny how he's a bigger character in the show, but he's actually probably worse.
Oh yeah, he's more loathsome in the book, I think.
And he's ugly in the books. It just adds to his whole like
misshapen, fleshy, and
the lips like worms and all that. George really describes him in a way that you just want to hate him.
Yeah, very vividly right.
Well, if you have wormy lips in A Song of Ice and Fire, you're a pretty horrible character. So. Joffrey gets the same description. So.
Yeah, I think so as well. So now the question is, what's next for Ramsay in general? Is he going to be bringing the rest of the North to heel, preparing for the Southern reaction, finding the rest of the Starks? Well, it's pretty clear. First off, he wants to kill Jon.
That's still likely, I think, yeah.
Yeah, he spells it out in this episode, doesn't he? He sees the death of Jon as the key to retaining the North. So that will be number one on his agenda. But he'll also want to be keeping his allies, named as the Umbers, Manderleys, and Karstarks, very close, making sure that they're under his thumb when he brings war, remembering his little speech about how important they were for retaining the North.
Yeah,
yes.
I think that I agree with that, and I think that whatever he does, he's going to do it the same way he's done everything. He's going to treat the North like he treated the Kerwins. I think that was our sort of hint as to how he's going to bring people in line. He's not going to take lessons from his father. He's going to do things his way. I think that's it. And I don't see that ending well for him. I wonder if he'll last the season. It'll be close. I think he might.
Right, just barely last the season. I think he'll die at the end of the season. I kind of do. I think that big battle that's going to happen, I think it'll end with his death.
Yeah, I don't see him winning that battle.
Yeah, I don't see him winning the battle, and I guess it's possible for him to escape or for the death sentence to not be carried out, but I think he will.
Cool.
So let's move on to King's Landing.
Yeah.
We got a few different scenes here. First, we're going to cover Jaime and Tommen and the High Sparrow. And one of the first notable things is that Tommen indicates that no one knows who killed Prince Trystane, so it's still not known that it was the Sand Snakes.
Wait, Arya knows who killed Trystane? No one knows who killed Trystane? Sorry, folks. Can't resist.
You really did.
Yeah, so that's kind of neat there. It's up in the air. It makes you think that they're not entirely done with Dorne yet. That's still going to come up at some point.
My big question is, are Nymeria and Obara still in King's Landing? I hope so, personally. I want to see them mess some stuff up.
Yeah, there's plenty of stuff to mess up. It wouldn't be hard to topple this house of cards that Cersei's trying to rebuild whatever she's doing. And Tommen talks about how he needs to be stronger, how he needs to kind of be more like his mother, I guess, which is scary. But then he immediately just leaves when the High Sparrow comes in, and that's the man he wants to confront. But Jaime's like, "Go see your mother," and he just leaves. It's like, did you not hear what you just told yourself to do, Tommen? Be stronger, and you just I don't think Tommen has it in him to be this kind of character that he thinks he needs to be.
Tractable.
Yeah. But I like this Jaime versus High Sparrow thing. It's pretty neat how Jaime tries to intimidate him, and he shows that he's intimidated, but not by Jaime. He's like, yeah, I fear death. I fear the gods. And he names 3 gods that he fears specifically. Now, I'm going to admit that I was probably wrong about something. In the show only review, I had told Sean I didn't think it meant much that he just named those 3 specific gods, the mother, the warrior, and the father, and left out the others. But several people have written in, including our own Lord Gregor of the Bread Fort, Gregor the Toasty, who pointed out that a good alternate explanation that some other people wrote us with a similar explanation, so here it is. He fears the mother because it's her mercy that all men have to have. It's either fearing her loss of her mercy or just fearing her mercy in general. The judgment of the father, which is the judgment of the gods, of course, all men should fear that. And the warrior is the dangerous one, especially from his point of view as a champion of the small folk, because when the realm is at war, it's the small folk who suffer. Meanwhile, the other gods, the crone is wisdom. You don't fear wisdom. The maiden is innocence and purity. You certainly don't fear that. The stranger is death. Well, he fears death, but he doesn't fear being dead. So you can kind of see, yeah, he's not afraid of, he's afraid of dying perhaps without pleasing the gods, something along those lines. And who did I forget? The smith. The smith is work. Work is not something to fear. Certainly this Septon does not fear work, walking around in his bare feet, serving bowls of brown to the small folk. So he's not averse to working. So I like that interpretation. I think that was pretty cool. And then, so it's basically a scene of intimidation, Jaime trying to intimidate versus better intimidation. The High Sparrow shows that he's intimidated, but not by Jaime. And then all these other sparrows show up, and Jaime's looking around like, all right, well, and then his line about, we are, who are we? But, together we can bring down an empire.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's an interesting thing. I had this thought when he said that line, we have no names, we have no families. And I couldn't tell if Lancel was one of them, but all I could think of was, we have no families except Jaime's cousin who's standing,
That's a great point.
But it's a good point. I liked the scene a lot. I liked Jaime's challenge about the punishment, this, his kind of comment, both in the story, the comment to the High Sparrow, but also a kind of a metatextual comment on the inequity of Cersei's punishment versus all the things he's done.
Yeah.
What are you going to do to me? So.
To me, that shows that he's actually fairly ambitious. That the charges he's leveling against these people have more to do with trying to get control over them, or in general just control by knocking the rulers of the realm back a step or two.
Yeah. And
so I think it's about power. And
it shows that Jaime's onto it. He's like, you're not really interested in sin, her sin, or my sin. You're interested in power. Is exactly.
That's why, because Jaime's just a Kingsguard. Taking him out,
Commander of Kingsguard.
It would be important.
Very much.
But Jaime, that's true, the Lord Commander. But he doesn't wield a great political power. He certainly has influence because he's not close to people that have great political power. But as we know from the books, Jaime's not terribly interested in ruling and doing those sort of things. And the High Sparrow probably knows that. Jaime's been around a while. He knows that Jaime has never shown an interest in those sort of things. So.
Yeah, and of course Cersei and Marjorie are both much more, as women, are much more vulnerable to this sort of thing than. Yeah. So.
And they're actually ambitious, and they actually want power, whereas Jaime is like, I want to fight people. I want to regain my honor. That's his deal.
So let's move on, I think, to Robert Strong. He's never called that in the show, actually.
He doesn't really have a name.
We'll continue to call him that.
It's cool. We're getting close to, really, it's like a tease. It's just like showing what this guy can do. But we're not quite there. We almost, with that scene with the Lannister guards being intimidated, I thought maybe that was going to be a little action. But
I thought we were going to see them all killed or something for a moment.
Just a little tease is all it was.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been waiting for Robert Strong, or whatever he's called in the show. In the books, I've been waiting to see what he can do. It seems like forever now. And here on the TV show, it was quite satisfying. We see Gregor Clegane smashing another head, don't we? Remembering not only Oberyn, but baby Aegon too. Don't forget about that. Head was dashed against the wall, it says. He disposed of that guy with like a similar ease to the way women dispose of the guy in the Night's Watch scene, and I have to admit that I found a certain dark humor in both scenes. Am I bad for that?
Not at all. I think everyone, we watched it with a big group of people, and we all laughed when that happened.
Just like, what's he gonna do to him? Just mash. Just it was so just simple and just dismissive. Like, yeah, that was cool. And it's a bit, to me, it's a bit of a sign that Cersei is starting to become herself again, which is that she's real petty about these kind of things. Sending out her man to kill a nobody for something like this is really not. I mean, it's hard to imagine that somebody else sent him. Like, first of all, no one seems to command him but her at this
Maybe
point. What we're seeing, possibly Qyburn. Yes, that's the one thing that makes me hedge on this point. But I think it was. I mean, he comes right back to Cersei. Cersei kind of notices the blood on his arm, and then heads out. He just follows her.
Yeah.
So,
I think that points to her knowing that she sees the blood and is no reaction.
She's like,
all. Just yes.
Good, it's done. You know, like that. Got what he deserved.
And they have that confrontation with the Lannister guards, and do you guys have to wonder what is going through their mind? Because Gregor Clegane is noted many occasions to be the only person in the kingdom who's that tall.
Yeah.
You know? Like, the Hound comes close, but no one is 8 feet tall. What are these guys thinking? Like, there's gotta be Gregor Clegane in there. Like,
yeah, we know from the Dance with Dragons epilogue, which I published an episode on that recently, or we published an episode on that recently, rather, and talked about that very thing and how Kevin knows. He's like, Kevin seems to know who it is, and Kevin also thinks that Tarly and Mace Tyrell, they all know who it is too, but no one has any reason to talk about it. They're like, well, what's the point of bringing it up? It's just, who's going to do something about it? You know, it's a good way to get your head smashed in. So, okay. Well, let's take a quick break, and we'll come back to talk about Cersei and Tommen, and then we'll move on to Essos and beyond.
All right, so that Cersei and Tommen scene, I just want to say that it was utterly ruined to me by the knowledge that Cersei is into incest, like with her cousin and her brother, and like I really feel like I shouldn't have gotten any weird feelings there, but I felt weird watching that scene. I really did.
Yeah.
Just me, but so for some non-incest focused thoughts, let's go to Yolkboy.
Okay, what was interesting to me is that Cersei asks if Marcella's shroud was gold or red, and she actually seems happy enough to hear that it was gold, which the viewer could have predicted. But obviously the golden shrouds for her children were part of her feared Valancourt prophecy. So it's kind of like Cersei is watching fate unraveling before her eyes, and at this point there's just nothing she can do. She's almost resigned to the prophecy at this point, and so hearing that Marcella's had a golden shroud just doesn't surprise her or upset her or shock her at all. She just kind of takes it in a stride. She's not bothered anymore.
Well, yeah, I noticed an inverse parallel there with Mel, who's tried. We talked about the comparison between Mel and Cersei, I think, in the last episode, but here, or in this episode specifically, I thought they've both tried so desperately to make prophecy. Well, Mel has tried so desperately to help make prophecy come true, while Cersei has tried to keep it from coming true. But for all of their efforts, the world is just happening. Fate is just happening the way it's going to happen. And in this episode, you see them both just resigned and defeated. And this is a pretty cool parallel.
But both on the upswing, really.
They're coming back now. So.
With Cersei, though, there's it's a bit of a dark streak to it because she still thinks Tommen is doomed, and there's nothing she can do about it. So she's going to do what she needs to do, and she's going to help her son who's asking for help. And on some level, she's got to be pleased that Tommen's like talking to her the way she wants to be talked. He's saying the things that she's wanted to hear. He's like, we need to be terrible to our enemies, and it's only us that matter. And Cersei's like, yeah, exactly. But why didn't you tell me this a long time ago, or something like that? Because you could tell because she doesn't react really strongly to it. She's not like, yes, son, yes. She's just like, of course I'll help you. and she just, but without a lot of emotion behind it. And I think that's because deep down she still believes the prophecy, and she's like, well, yeah, I'm going to help you. Of course I'm going to help you. I'm your mother, but you're doomed.
She still thinks she's doomed. Which is really different from the from book Cersei and book Tommen, because really in the books mainly she bullies Tommen.
Yeah.
They don't have these kind of tender moments.
And she hasn't been pushed quite as far because Marcella's alive in the books. Yeah. That's a huge difference. And we predicted that there'd be some conflict between Tommen and Cersei. And maybe that was wrong, and now that they're uniting, or maybe that's just going to come later. Maybe it'll come
once Marjorie's free.
Yeah, Marjorie could be the divider there. But for now, they seem united, and that's interesting. So maybe that's just going to make their split bigger. But it's also interesting to point to because it's one of the few regions. We talked so much about how every region is doing infighting. So far, the Lannisters are going in the opposite direction for now. There's some problems with it.
Well, see, I was saying that there is infighting when you look at it at King's Landing.
Oh, yeah.
Because we have the High Sparrow.
Yes.
So there is infighting in the capital.
That's true. I just mean within their own house.
Not within a family.
Yeah. You're right. Yeah, that's a good distinction to make, for sure.
So let's move on, I think, to Essos. First, we're going to cover Marine. And I wanted to cover first, which is kind of one of the biggest thoughts on my mind here. It's kind of a minor thought, but I'm just wondering, how do you think that the dragons are going to get out of their room? Mm-hmm. Because there's a few options there. I don't think they can exactly walk out the door. And it seems to me that the building has to be blown up or broken open in some way for them to get out. And there's some options there. I was thinking that maybe Tyrion wants to let them free and he has to blow the building open. Or I was thinking that the Sons of the Harpy either want to let them free or want to kill them and mess up.
They'd be the Quentin in this
situation. And then they blow
a whole bunch of Quentins.
Or the other possibility is dragons themselves are free. They're strong. Maybe they get angry and they themselves
break to eat finally.
Bust through. I don't know. I really don't see them walking through the door. What about you, Aziz? Sorry. What about you, Lady Gwyn?
I was going to agree with you. I don't think they're going to. The way it's presented, it doesn't look like they can fit. But it is. They could just ignore that. Was what I was going to say. Like the show could just assume that maybe we didn't notice that and just show them out in the air and be like, oh, look, the dragons escaped.
There's a rear entrance.
Somehow, right.
That's funny.
Service elevator.
But I think the bigger question than that question is, will Tyrion ride a dragon? And if so, will it be this season? Let's start with you, Lady Gwyn.
Well, it certainly seems like it's being set up that way. I think, yeah, I'd like to see that maybe right at the end of the season. Remember, dragon lore is important to Tyrion. I actually think that's a big part of his purpose to Illyrio's plot and A Dance with Dragons when he spends that time with John Connington. So, yeah, I do think so.
Mm-hmm. All right, I think Tyrion will definitely ride a dragon, in my opinion, humble opinion, in both the books and the TV show. It would actually make a very nice high point for Tyrion's story this season in the TV show if that happened there, as it seems like it's a pretty slow arc, doesn't it? And with the possibility of only 13 episodes left after this season, which is what D&D have been saying, you'd think they'd want to get him on a dragon fairly quickly. And so the end of this season might be a really nice possibility.
Yeah, I agree with you. They don't have a whole lot of time to mess around with that. And I think we kind of all expect it to happen. I thought this scene was cool. They got to use a bit of dialogue from the books. That wasn't dialogue from the books, but it was lines from the books. Tyrion talking about his past, his dreams of having. It's cool. It's actually like a thing he tells Jon early in book 1 about the dreams of dragons, and here it is in season 6 of Game of Thrones. It just goes to show that even though they're past, the arcs of almost every book character, they can still back up and use some of these lines from the beginning of the story, which is really cool. And yeah, I don't know about dragons recognizing friends though. But really, to be honest, the dragons have been done a lot differently in the show. You need the right blood. There's no 3 heads of the dragon prophecy. That's all very different. So this is a really good place to make sure you do not confuse your book canon with your show canon. It does not have to work the same. You do not have to be a Targaryen. You don't have to have Targaryen blood. I mean, that's not even 100% proven because of Nettles, for example. But so it's just we shouldn't fall into that trap of thinking it's going to work the same way. So
yeah, I will say the scene, as much as I liked Tyrion, some of his dialogue in this scene. I liked him talking about his past, about asking his uncle for a dragon. I was disappointed about how we went about it. Aziz immediately thought of Nettles, and he thought that maybe he was going to bring food, because that's what Tyrion's asked if,
It's his last line. He says, "The time for them to have dinner."
Yeah, and so I thought we'd bring him some food and make them used to him. Or he asked Missandei if Missandei knows them, and so I thought Missandei would go with him, and neither of those things happened. It was a little disappointing to me.
Yeah, it was a good scene, but it was a little weird. There's some things that were a little strange about it, I think. But anyway, more to come with that. We've got a lot to talk about, so we should move on from that real quickly here. A shout out to our Patreon Northern Champions. Northern Champions get the benefit of episodes early, and this shout out every once in a while on episodes. First of all, Jay Wilson, Winter's King. Stephen Hill, Bastard of the Crag, Western bastard imported into the North, or exported to the North, how you like it. Sir Stephen, Hammer of the North. Small Paul of House Buckley, the Scourge of Skagos. Winter's King, a popular title these days, and a good one. Nico the Unknown of House Mormont, Bear Life, like that one. If you want to sign up to support the show on Patreon, go to historyofwesteros.com, click on the Patreon link on the right. Browse all the options and pick one that suits you. Let's move on to Bravos, shall we?
I think we all agree it was a perfectly fine scene, well acted, well done, but plot movement really, and it's nothing new to us. It's just same old Arya stuff, really. So we're not going to spend too much time here.
Yeah, it's like it's certainly the slowest moving plot line at this point. That's not necessarily a bad thing, because frankly, some of the plot lines move too fast, but. That said, there's really not a lot to say here. like Ashaya said, there's.
I liked it. I really liked seeing Maisie Williams just get the shit beat out of her. It's really enjoyable to me. I really don't like violence, but I really like seeing Arya beat up and swinging at nothing. It was humorous as well.
Yeah, it was good. Good scene, but there's not a lot to discuss about it.
But there's a little bit to discuss. Yolkboy?
Yeah, I guess the question is, the takeaway from the scene, is Jaqen really teaching Arya to be the authentic no one? Or is he just forcing her to be a better liar? I don't think any of us believe that Arya is truly becoming no one. And we did actually speak about this last week, so I'm not going to go over that again.
But worth mentioning for sure.
Definitely.
And it's hard to tell. It really is hard to tell what his motivations are there. But let's move on to some very more exciting subject matter, the Iron Islands, which also has multiple scenes to go over. First, we're going to start with Balon and Asha.
Yeah.
Or Yara, Asha Yara, as we call her.
Here's one of many things in this episode that are lines from the books that are in a much different place than their book arc. Here we have bits of Asha's Kingsmoot speech splattered throughout her talking to her father, and we also have especially the bit about pine cones and rocks and all that. And also a nod to, she mentions Deepwood Mott having fallen. It was their last stronghold that they had captured during this war. Of course, Deepwood Mott is where Asha is captured by Stannis in the books. So that's and it's the Glover's castle, the castle that she herself captured during that engagement. So that's kind of neat, little nod, little parallel there. It's also an extension. This scene shows us an extension of Balon's one victory that he can really claim. He tried so hard to get his revenge. He didn't really get his revenge, but he did outlive the guys he wanted to get revenge on. He's happy. At least he outlived Robert and Ned and all these other people that defeated him multiple times, kept him from doing what he wanted. So that's something for him to cling to. Unfortunately, he couldn't cling to the ropes. And I also like how Asha points out that they're powerful at sea and weak on land. It's kind of a setup. It's something we all know, but it's good to point that out because I think it might be setting up Dany, the involvement with her there. Lady Gwyn, did you have some thoughts on this as well?
Yeah, I know, that was a good scene when Balon says the other 4 kings are dead and I'm still here. I thought that was pretty much of an uh-oh moment, because that reminded us that he should be too, going back to the leeches and Mel's power, so it should be reminding us not only that his time might be limited, but also Melisandre's power, which is something that Davos does again in a much later scene. He kind of catalogs all the things that she's done. So cool connection there.
So then let's move on. I think that's all about this Balon and Asha scene. Let's move on to Balon and Euron.
This was a great scene. I really like the scene. I have a couple criticisms, but mostly I loved it. There's some nods to various Euron speeches in here, and that's the part I was not super happy on because those speeches were really, really awesome, and paraphrasing them felt a little weak. But other than that, the show did something really cool here that the book couldn't have done because Balon's death happened off screen, and that is this whole, like, who's the better Ironborn talk between them. That was just great because Balon is standing there accusing Euron of being a weak Ironborn because he couldn't handle himself in a storm at sea. It's like, what kind of Ironborn? And meanwhile, he's shaking with the bridge and moving around and being blown back and forth, and Euron is just stone still like a statue, and he's just kind of laughing at, like, yeah, you're talking about sea legs, huh, brother? Look at me, totally still. You're weaving and wobbling, and I thought that was genius. It was really good. I didn't really even catch that at first. It was Sean, our Unsullied reviewer, who really honed in on that and pointed out to me.
He's got a good eye for visual directing elements.
He does. He really does. And so if you don't watch our show reviews, that's one of the benefits right there. We've got someone with a keen eye for that sort of thing on our team. And I kind of thought for a minute there with that little fight there, Balon got in a slash on Euron's face. I thought they were going to have the eye thing and maybe do an eye patch. That would be cool. Of course, as we know in the books, Euron wears that eye patch out of creepiness or vanity. He doesn't actually, nothing's wrong with his eye other than that it's a different color as his other one. So it would, but still they could have, done that as a way to have him look more sinister. But now he just got a little cut on the face.
So we have a couple questions here. I don't think I'm going to direct them to you guys. I just want to get some comments. I want to know what you guys think. Will Theon meet Euron? Will he make it to the Iron Islands and meet him? Will Asha leave the Iron Islands on good or bad terms with Euron? And will Euron have a dragon horn? And you guys are welcome to answer this if you have a thought right now, but I mainly wanted to see what our commenters thought.
Yeah, some of these questions are for you all to answer as well as us. You may have insights that we don't. Definitely, you commenters out there a lot of times notice things that we don't. And that's the whole part of the experience is being a community and working on these things together and, addressing every idea on its own merit. Just because it didn't come from us doesn't mean it's not a good idea. And
I'll answer it a little bit, I suppose. I really don't know if I think Asha's going to leave the Iron Islands on good or bad terms. Before this episode, I thought there was a chance it was going to be good terms, that she was going to be sent by Euron to go to Daenerys. But now that she seems pretty set on it being murder and Euron's going to show right up, I don't know that she'll just trust him.
Yeah, I think it's set up for them to come in conflict because she said, whoever did this, I'm going to feed them to the sharks.
But he might bring her around to his side, or she might pretend to be on his side.
It's true. It's true. I mean, if she's going to sort of play the role of Yara Victarion, Vic Yara, if that's where we're heading towards, then she might do a thing like Victarion does, which was agree to help, but really have her own agenda all along, which, well, she won't be able to marry Daenerys in place of Euron like Victarion's plan is, but she may have some sort of tricky thing planned.
Yeah.
The horn question is really interesting to me. I think they kind of have to do the horn. I think they have to have dragon conflict in the show. I think they're going to want to do that. They might not. I really hope they do. I really hope they do because it's a cool thing. I think show watchers will get really excited for the possibility of that because it's really the first time any of the other plot lines or regions in the story have addressed Daenerys' dragons in any sort of meaningful way. Like, what are we going to do? Like, even King's Landing at the end of A Dance with Dragons is just like, we'll deal with them. We'll be ready for them. No, nothing specific. Just Mace Tyrell's like, yeah. We'll be ready for them. If she bothers to come here, we'll be ready for her. How? What are you gonna do? She's got dragons and maybe Dothraki and all this stuff. Like, Euron's actually got a plan. As crazy as it is, he's actually thinking about the dragons and working on that whole thing. So I think they're going to want to do that.
We'll see. Assuming neither of you have any more thoughts, I think we'll move on to the funeral.
Okay.
So the funeral, I know Aziz and I thought that it was well done. We enjoyed it. It was
cool,
pretty cool.
I like the prayer they invented there.
Yeah, and so the priest was confirmed by Watchers on the Wall.
Always check Watchers on the Wall for stuff like this. They're really on top of this sort of thing.
So it's Aaron Damphair with the damp hair. He did have
damp hair.
And it's played by Michael Feast.
He's been aged up a bit,
maybe?
I guess. Yeah.
But personally, I really liked the detail of the seaweed that they put over Balon's face
That was
right
cool.
there.
Yeah. And the prayer.
That's the one. Sorry, that's the one thing missing from John's resurrection at Melisandre's resurrection salon. Should have put cucumbers on his eyes and seaweed on his face.
Yeah, there was no skincare at all in her salon.
We have in our notes for this episode, devolve into seaweed jokes.
Yeah, because when we're preparing for the episode, sometimes we just go off on the lame jokes, or really good jokes in this case.
Yeah, these are good jokes.
Whereas some of my other jokes are bad. But, so we talked a little bit about Asha knowing that it's murder, so how did Asha know it was murder?
I have some thoughts on this. I think there's two main reasons, and it's the two work sort of in concert together. Balon falling from the bridge is not very likely. That's a bridge he crosses all the time, and as they talked about on the bridge,
to his bedroom.
they're supposed to be good at handling storms. And the rope was high on that. It's pretty hard. Like, I can see you falling and slipping, but falling over the bridge, that's not likely. Let's be honest. That's just really not something that you would expect to see happen even for an older man like that. It's falling over the side. It's just not likely at all. Second of all, he drew his dagger. It's not going to have been in his sheath. So it's not that likely that the dagger would come loose falling, even though he fell that great distance, because he didn't hit the rocks. He went into the water. Yeah. At least, and even if he did hit the rocks, it's not that likely that it's going to dislodge his dagger from his sheath. It's possible, just like it's possible that he fell off the bridge. But both those things together, very unlikely. So I think that's how she knew.
Good job, CSI.
Westeros CSI. CSI Iron Islands. CSI Pike.
All right, so we've gotten through all the regions. I can't believe it.
We did.
We're on to our little wrap-up pre-credits area, and we've been asked a few times to do a little bit of an episode rating, 1 to 10. So we're going to go around and give our episode rating. For me, it's closer to an 8.5. I would not round it up to a 9. I would round it up down to an 8. But Aziz said we can do 0.5, so mine's an 8.5.
I'm right with you. I'm going to give it an 8.5 also. I was debating between the 8 or the 8.5, but I just really liked it. And the more I thought about it, the more I liked it. Sometimes, upon further review, things get worse. You think you find holes and inconsistencies. Upon further review, I like this one more. I like the Euron scene more after the fact. The Bran scene was just awesome right away, and it stayed awesome. Noticing some of the themes of the episode upon reflection were really cool. So yeah, 8.5.
Lady Gwyn.
I'm right there with you guys.
Right there.
Yeah.
Yolkboy?
Yeah, I'll give it an 8. Sorry to go down 0.5. Maybe I'm just a stupid marker. I really enjoyed the episode a heck of a lot, and 8's a high mark, I think.
Yeah, that is really.
I think it's a high mark too. Yeah, this is an episode I've liked more than, I don't know when the last episode I liked this much was. It definitely wasn't last season. Before that.
And that bodes well, because a lot of us were really worried about how the season would go, because they don't have as much book material to draw on. But as we're seeing, there's a surprising amount of book material for them to still draw on. They're just doing it in a different order. Like Tyrion's, again, harkening back to Tyrion's speech to the dragons, which to me he was psyching himself up to stay calm, because dragons can sense fear like any animal, and he was just doing that to calm himself. It's a kind of a cool device. That's, again, from early Game of Thrones, those lines. And if we're going to go to the Riverlands later, then there's a lot of book material they can use there. So
another thing we wanted to cover was what our favorite and least favorite moments are. So I'm going to ask everyone at the same time, what your favorite and least favorite moments are. I'll start with myself.
Yeah, you start.
My absolute favorite moment was, of course, Lyanna Starr. She was perfect. It was really good in her boy's clothing and her horse, and it was awesome. My other favorite moments were the newly improved Leaf, as I mentioned before, and just that whole brand scene was just my favorite. It was really good. My least favorite moment was that, to me, it didn't really seem clear enough that it was Aeron in that scene, and that Asha seemed kind of clueless about the legal process there, and I really thought that was another case where just 1 or 2 lines would clarify everything. But it will be clarified soon. Really, I had very few complaints this episode. My biggest complaint, I think, was just I thought the CGI on the dragons was kind of weak. Just like with the Daenerys' never-ending story, I feel like the bigger the dragons are getting, the more unrealistic they're looking. I mean, I know they're dragons. They're not realistic. They're fantasy creatures. But that was mine. Really minor. Like I said, I liked this episode. So let's go to you, Aziz.
I really liked, because I'm such a Robert Strong fanboy, which is a weird character to like, because he's a giant undead zombie thing. But I've been talking since last season, Yolkboy 2. We talk a lot about how we're excited to see him in action, and this tease of that, him intimidated. This just his flinch towards the Lannister guards, and they all just plus their reaction when he walks away, and the lead guy's like, oh, you could see the fear just melting away, like, oh man, I do not want to face that thing. So that was really cool. I love that. I mean, really, honestly, probably the brand flashback was cooler, but you guys, you mentioned that.
And they're going to mention it.
I think I'm not the only one you're not the only one who thought that was their best. So I just wanted to mention something different.
What about your least favorite?
My least favorite moment in the episode.
Nickel at you the most.
I actually struggled to come up with my least favorite moment. I think it's probably just the simplicity of Roos's death. Like, it was just sort of, I thought it deserved a little more fanfare, which is similar to the resurrection. Was also just kind of simple, which I didn't mind that as much upon reflection. But the Bolton thing was a little rushed to me, and yeah. But but I didn't hate it, I guess. So that just shows you how strong this episode was. That I couldn't really. It was hard for me to pick out what my least favorite moment was.
All right. What about you, Yolkboy?
Okay, my favourite was Bran's flashback, and in particular seeing the really happy medieval lifestyle in Winterfell. And I would actually love a whole entire episode of Bran flashbacks, and I'm sure you guys would too. As for my least favourite, like you guys, there's nothing that I really hated about the episode at all. So I'll kind of pick something which I really didn't like, which was Ramsay holding a baby. I found that worse and more. I found that more disturbing than when he actually released the dogs. Just when he was there with a baby in his hands, and you're thinking, what's he going to do? I thought he was going to drop it on the floor or something horrible.
Yeah, it was like a tease of what's to come. Something horrible. It's like, is it going to be now, right out in the open? No, it'll be 2 minutes later.
All right, Lady Gwyn, what about you?
Well, I'm going to have to go with Lyanna. Definitely. Big high point. Also, when Theon said to Sansa, I would have died to get you there. I mean, I'm just, my God. The tears. Something about both last week and this week, the scenes between Theon and Sansa just really got me.
Right on.
So my least favorite moments, obviously, anything to do with Ramsay and a baby. Ramsay, when he released the dogs and his eyes were kind of like, there's a close-up and his eyes are tracking back and forth. You can see it. It's really gross. But then, that was least favorite because of the content. Episode-wise, kind of the dialogue in Marine seems really weak. Didn't care for that much, and like we mentioned, maybe a couple of pacing things in some of the other things, like with the resurrection and like you just said with the Roos. So, but overall, I mean, obviously, liked it.
That's good. It's a good sign. Our criticisms are pretty mild all around.
Yeah, we got to really dig in there to find our criticisms.
Something we didn't talk about from an overarching view, the theme of a small sub-theme of giants in this episode. We talked about the mention of Hodor's giant's blood, and which is probably not a literal meaning, but it might have been. But mostly about him being unstoppable and that possibility. The line we see the mountain being unstoppable, easily crushing the head, and then we see 1-1, the same things. There's an interesting presence of giants in this episode, which I don't know that there's any deeper meaning to that. It's just kind of cool and maybe something to look forward to more of.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's going to be a theme of the season, is these big people being formidable. From Robert Strong, as we know he's going to be featured, and in 1-1, we can imagine he's not going to stop being badass.
Maybe we'll see.
And I think we'll see Hodor maybe have a little fight of his own if Bran walks into him.
And maybe we'll see some sort of great creature of the White Walkers. Maybe they've got like the ice. Maybe we'll see the ice spiders or some sort of ice. I don't suppose we'll see maybe an ice dragon or an ice giant would fit this theme. But
yeah, I guess the dragons kind of fit into that too. They're so huge.
They're
unstoppable.
Yeah. What about an undead giant? Some giants were killed. What if the walkers bring?
As we talked about, if Melisandre manages to bring back 1-1, we'll have giant versus giant.
Whoa! Clash of the Titans, literally.
Yes.
Okay, let's take another quick break, and then we'll discuss some things. We'll focus in on some book parallels, and then we'll do our credits and supporters list. And after the credits, we'll come back and talk about some spoilery topics based on the next on episode 3 type stuff. Okay, so some of you have heard this before. We talked about how we wanted to do a bit of a support group theme from time to time, and the concept of that comes from one of our listeners, Lady Direliz of Castle Naki, the Alpha patron, and she suggested that a while back, that we discuss how to deal with the books being passed by the show. And I think a lot of us have kind of settled into the idea that, hey, a lot of this isn't spoiling the books, but hey, some of it is. So by talking through some of these plot lines, we may be able to get a better handle on what does and doesn't apply, and that can maybe help us to come to terms with what we've been spoiled on or what we haven't been spoiled on, because it's nice to think, hey, this is probably going to be a lot different in the books. So there's something to look forward to, the fact that it's going to be a lot different, that we haven't been spoiled, that we have no idea what's coming, even though the show has just blatantly done things that are, important. So we kind of discussed the resurrection thing a lot already. We don't necessarily need to talk about that, but it's important to note as one of the things that's a parallel to the books, Theon returning to the Iron Islands. What do you guys think about that? Is this going to be like a Torgon the Latecomer thing? Is this going to tie? It's so hard to tell because it seems like they're going to do the King's Moot. Well, they're definitely going to do the King's Moot. Is Theon going to be there for it, which would be a big difference than the books, obviously?
I don't think he will.
Think he'll get there afterwards?
I think he'll get there after. I think it'd just be so much simpler for them.
Yeah, like he'd have to be in the King's Moot if he showed up, and he would have to lose, presumably, and then that would close the door on something coming later. I tend to agree with you. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I don't think he's going to make it for that. I mean, it's so hard to say what's going to happen in the show. I mean, in the books, I tend to think that his destiny lies elsewhere. Even because the whole Theon the Latecomer thing is more of a thing of people wanting to use him for their own, even though it's his sister, for their own purposes. Once again, which has been a theme of his arc, and I think he's got to escape that somehow. So
yeah. So a lot of these things we discussed throughout the episodes, some of this is tying up the loose ends and kind of putting together in one section these things that we think are the most important parts to relate to the books, along with the resurrection thing. And Theon, we have the wildlings reacting to Jon's death, which I think there's a good chance will be different. I think a lot of people predict like a bloodbath situation there at the Wall, and that kind of maybe colored our expectations for what would happen in the show. And it was anything but a bloodbath, except for one guy got a bloodbath, I suppose. the Sir Patrick
whoever
nod.
was underneath that guy.
Yeah, yeah, whoever just got sprinkled with the
blood shower.
Yeah. And then, so but that's hard to predict. We don't know whether, maybe we were all wrong about what's going to happen at the Wall. Maybe it will be more contained. Maybe the wildlings will be upset, but they won't just go around slaughtering Night's Watchmen. But we have this rampaging giant already at the Wall. He's been stabbed, nastily by Sir Patrick and all that. So I guess that's just kind of hard to say.
Yes.
Bran leaving the cave was a fairly big surprise. Lady Gwyn, you expected that though, didn't you?
I did, yeah. Yeah, I've never. I always have to throw in and be a little different on certain things, and no, I've never thought Bran was going to stay in that cave. It just didn't feel satisfying for his arc. So when she said that, I was like, yes, but but then there's that part of you that's like, wait a minute, I don't know, is that really the sport? Who knows? how we're finding these things out.
Yeah, this is one of the ones I tend to think is more likely to be a spoiler or have a relation to the book than some of the other ones. It's a little more of a long-term end game type of detail versus Theon going to the Iron Islands. It's like that doesn't have to relate to his end game, nor does the wildlings' reaction and all these tiny details. Where these long-term things, I put a little more weight to the show.
Yeah. So, okay, what about Willis and Hodor? I mean, that we didn't really. I don't know if anybody even saw that coming at all, as far as in the books.
I mean, we see it coming in that we think that he didn't always just say Hodor. He had an identity before this.
Yeah.
We don't see it happening in this way or Bran finding this out like this, but I don't think it was a surprise to any of us to see Hodor talking.
Yeah, I guess it wasn't a surprise. Maybe it's a surprise to hear that we're going to learn
more.
That we're going to learn more. That the fact that they decided this is important to show, because they have to cut things out because they can't show everything. So the fact that they're showing this, maybe that's the surprise to me, that it's worth showing, that they think it's important.
Yeah, I think when we tie it, like people had theories about how this happened, and tying it to the characters we see, like Benjen or Rhaegar or whatever theories they have, and that's where it maybe gets more significant. But I also think it's possible that we see this just because Hodor's really popular in the show. Like, he's really insanely popular. And so I can't help but have some doubt about the significance of this relating to the books because of that. And it's also not an endgame thing, so I have more doubt.
That's a good point. That's a very good point. Okay, one other item on the book connection to show action that we're doing here. Yolkboy, tell us what you think about Ramsay and Roose. That's certainly something that's, I think we talked about it a bit earlier, that we think it's going to be a bit different. Maybe you've got some ideas on why it might be different. Maybe not how, because that's kind of unpredictable, but why it might be different, I think we've honed in on a bit.
Yeah, I have to say that it's possible that Ramsay does kill Roose. Like you say, differently is the most likely. You've got to remember that Book Roose is far, far more wary of Ramsay. He's far more clued up. And he notes that any other heirs will be in immediate danger from Ramsay. I mean, it's spelled out. So you get some insight into Roose's mind. And he's certainly not going to trust him enough to give him a nice little affectionate bear hug. So he's expected to be different. And I just want to... I was on George's Not a Blog, which is where he writes about the sad puppies. It's George's personal blog where he writes about NFL and stuff like that. But he did actually make a comment recently. He said, a character dying on the show does not mean they will die in the books. And some who will die will not die in the same way or at the same hands. And that's George's words. So who knows what he was posting that in reference to, but I think it's just a general warning about blurring the canons between the books and shows and taking away too much that we see.
Right on. Good takes there. Okay, so let us make some acknowledgments. Thanks, of course, to Lady Gwyn and Yolkboy. Tell everyone again where to find you out there on the interwebs.
Yeah, we're from Radio Westeros. We're a podcast, and come and find us at radiowesteros.com. Alternatively, we do have a YouTube channel, which is just Radio Westeros, and we'd love to see some of you guys come and giving us a try, see what you think.
Yeah, well, their latest episode, or pair of episodes, is on Littlefinger, a character who has yet to appear this season. I'm sure we're wondering when he's going to pop up. Probably pretty soon, maybe next episode, although no indication of that yet. We'll see. So... let me thank our Patreon supporters. Thanks to First Lord Cash Craig, Hand of the King, and Lord of Minds, Lord of Makers. Thanks to Lord Jim the Fortuitous of Wars and Politics of Ice and Fire blog and Warden of the West. Thanks to Lord George Stormsville, the Cunning, Lord of the Chiliad and Warden of the East. Lord John Reed is the Lord of Castle Woodbridge, the Lord Borealis, the Light of the North, and Warden of the North. Outside the realm, we have Rory the Rogue, Archer Extraordinaire, and King Beyond the Wall, subjugator of the show-only version of the Thenns, meaning the cannibal tribes. That had to be a tough one. We have Lord James Inkblade, the Scholar Knight, Master of Whisperers, the senior member of our small council. We also have Lord Robert Jacobs, Master of Coin. Rosie the Clever is Master of Laws, and Lord James Tuttle is Master of Ships, a.k.a. Grand Admiral, if you prefer Cersei's Feast for Crows titles. We have Lady Direliz of Castle Naki, mentioned earlier, the Alpha Patron. Lord Dan of the Red Mountains, and Castle Great Bell, breaker of the Second Stone, meaning the second Patreon milestone we ever had. Lord Skip of the Veldt, Lord of Castle Ganges. Cabethian Frozen, Lord of the Bricks and Castle Crimson Light. Mary Meg, Lady of the Bloody Stepstones. Gregor the Toasty, Lord of the Breadfort. Alicia Everlasting of the Green Blood, Lady of Desert Rose. Jeffrey the Unflinching, Lord of Sand Lake. Lord Greybay of the Queen City. Lord Ryan of Castle Stonegate, Guardian of the Rocky Mountain Pass. Lord Garin de Haviland of Devil's Hand Keep. Lord Brandon Slate, the North Hammer, Harbinger of the Old Gods. Lady Bram, Light of Winter's Garden, Beacon of the Northwest. And Lord Mark Joseph, the Snow in Winterfell. Also thanks to King's Justice Sir Troy the Steady, wielder of the Valyrian Steel Blade Fate. Thanks to Sir Terence, Knight of the Cedars. Thanks to our new Lord Commander Casey Harrison of the Kingsguard, as well as our Night's Watch helpers, Lord George the Golden, and First Ranger Fabian Flowers, the Bastard of Greenshield. And thanks to all the other patron supporters. If you want to check out us on Patreon, again, it's go to historyofwesteros.com. On the upper right, there's a link to Patreon, and everything that you need to know is explained there. So, let's talk about spoilery stuff, post-credits, spoilery fun. Ashaya, tell us some things about the blurbs for the upcoming episode.
All right, I will share the description. It's fun to think about how they could be tricking us, like with that Night's Watch.
Yeah, we got to be on our guard now after that, right? Standing behind the Lord Commander. Oh, they got us good there.
It's Daenerys meets her future. Bran meets the past. Tommen confronts the High Sparrow. Arya trains to be no one. Varys finds an answer, and Ramsay gets a gift.
Okay.
Yeah, that gets a gift is the worst. The gift of death.
The gift of gab. Ramsay becomes very talkative.
But first, so if they don't mention Jon here, but we know we're going to see Jon as we saw in the preview.
The preview shows him kind of walking amongst the wildlings and them kind of like in awe.
Yeah.
And the voiceover says they think you're like a
Yeah,
they
think you're a god.
A god, okay.
They call him a god. So they think you're a god, and we're assuming they're talking about Jon.
Yeah, well, they weren't talking about Ollie.
I would say goddess from Melisandre is all like that. That's
very good point. Very good.
But it seems likely to be Jon because
probably not Davos.
But so the question is, what will the official story of Jon's death and resurrection be? Will it be an attempted murder, or will the actual story of his resurrection spread? And I think it's going to spread because of this line about being a god. I don't think they can keep it contained if these wildlings just know. So whether people are going to believe it in the realm at large, who knows? But it'll be spread, I think. Yolkboy had a really interesting thought here.
Yeah, earlier I mentioned one potential parallel between Jon and Dany that might be emerging. And this thing about Jon being perceived as a god could be another. The wildlings could see Jon as a god, and the Dothraki could follow Dany similarly. Once they get a taste of Drogon, they might kind of see her as a god, or see the dragon as a god, and her as the rider of that anyway. So these two factions could be following Jon and Dany for these kind of divine reasons.
I like that interpretation a lot. The Dothraki are all about riding. Horses is the main thing. And Dany's got like the super nuclear horse.
I was thinking about there's even a similarity between who would be following them, and that they're both a savage, wilder culture. They're wildlings and Dothraki.
That's a really good observation. The wildlings and the Dothraki.
I think it's a really great parallel that Yolkboy caught there that I personally hadn't caught at all, and I'm looking forward to seeing that parallel, and I think it will be.
Yeah, that's really cool. You wonder if that'll be like that in the books. Maybe the wildlings will think of Jon like they'll be in awe of him, or they'll be afraid of him, like, because you can see them being afraid of him, like, because they're afraid of The Walking Dead. The TV show, they're afraid of it, They're afraid of televisions. What is that strange device? Pictures and talking and all that. So, Yeah, so I could see that going differently in the books, but in fact, I would guess this possibility if the trailer didn't tell us otherwise. So.
So let's move on to something that we're very worried about.
Yeah.
In that we see here Ramsay gets a gift from the Umbers, and they say, "I have a gift for you," in this little preview.
Yeah, and then the screenshot of Ramsay. I paused it, looked at it. He's clearly looking down at someone, and he's got this awful, horrible, like, wicked wolf grin on his face. Like,
yeah, like that's exactly what I wanted.
Exactly, and the way he says, I forget exactly what he says, but the way he says it is as if you're speaking to a child. That was just my possibly colored interpretation because I'm already dreading it, but I really felt like he's talking to a little kid there.
Yeah, and then of course we have that line from one of the trailers before the season, "Do you want to play a game, little man?" Or maybe it's, "Do you like games, little man?" And we thought at the time that it was maybe Rickon. We were hoping against hope it was Littlefinger or something else. And we still have a little bit of a hope here, and that maybe, just maybe, it's a fake Rickon.
Yeah.
Frickon,
like Faria or Fagon from the books. And that would make a lot of sense for them to adopt this plot and kind of change it. You know, they have, instead of a fake Arya given to Ramsay, you have a fake Rickon given to Ramsay. That could totally be the case. And the problem with it is, if they were going to do this, why didn't they do it sooner? The timing of it makes it seem like they're allying with Ramsay now that he's kind of come out on top. Stannis is gone, Roose is gone, the North is in disarray a bit, so bringing a gift to the new leader is a great way to get in with him. And this is his moment, during his moment of triumph. But, you know, that doesn't mean they're not like, holy crap, what did you do? We're against you, but we're not going to be upfront about it. A couple of things to remember here. There's no Great John in the books or in the show anymore because the actor left the show after season 2 and they just didn't bother to recast him. So there's no Great John in captivity at the River Run, which is an important thing. In fact, in the books, he may not even be a captive at River Run anymore because Jaime ordered Lord Walder to give all the prisoners to the crown. We don't know if that actually happened yet, but it's important to note that even in the books, Great John may no longer be a captive of the Freys. But it's also important to note that in the books, Ramsay knows what Rickon and Bran look like because he's the one that was with Theon when they were hunting for them and all that. He saw them, etc. But here in the show, Ramsay's never met Rickon or Bran, so that leaves this possibility open. So maybe it's too much to hope for. Maybe we're just like trying to find hope against something that's going to be horrible. But
another little thing that lends a little more credibility to the theory to me is the inclusion of Manderley in that, and Karstark, Umber, and Manderley.
And we know Davos is going to go around to the Northern Lords, like trying to give up support, so we can get that scene. We can get here's the real Rickon, you know.
Yeah, maybe so, maybe
that
so.
Would be great.
I still lean towards it being the real Rickon, just because I don't want to get my hopes up. I'd rather be pleasantly surprised right now and see that it's a fake Rickon.
Yeah.
But we'll see.
Fingers are crossed, but you know, I'm not going to be laying any bets on it.
But another question about this gift is, why are the Umbers revealing it now?
Yeah.
And one idea is Stannis just died recently. It's been like maybe as much as a week, because obviously Sansa and Brienne and Theon are just out in the woods. We figured it couldn't have been that long since Stannis died.
Yeah.
So
Agreed.
it's just about enough time for them to decide to show their gift.
Mm-hmm. Maybe. I don't have any answers. I have more questions. Like, would they know about Sansa? You know, have the Boltons managed to contain that information? Could the Umbers know about that and now think that they're helping? Like, oh, here we got another Stark for you.
Yeah.
That's the one you lost. Or did they just want to maybe reunite Sansa with her little brother, and like they thought it was safe to come out now? I mean.
As well, one thing I think Aziz took note of was that Karstark is in the room when Roose mentions that he lost Sansa. So Karstark, if he didn't know before, he knows now.
The Karstark conspirators, who clearly are with Ramsay, this weakens his position a bit, and they don't know Bran and Rickon are alive too. So if that comes up, well, I assume that if this is a Rickon or fake Rickon, then the Karstark will see that too, and one way or another he'll be fooled, or it'll be the real Rickon, and there'd be nothing to be fooled about.
I think that's it on this terrifying subject.
Yes, we should know by next week, though. At least we don't have that long to wait.
We had the thought that, like, what if he's like, I gave you a gift, and it ends on, like, the shot of Ramsay looking down, and you don't see
we have to wait another week.
But, no, I'm sure.
Then at week 4, they don't go to the Boltons at all, so we have to wait till week 5.
I hope.
Drag it out.
Okay, so another big question is, will R plus L equals J be explicitly shown in this next episode or this season at all? Or are they going to just allude to it and not really make it clear?
And the reason we ask this question is because we know, I know some of you, we've been told that some watchers of the show outside the U.S. don't always get to see what the preview for next week is. And so some people don't know why we're talking about that. It's because the Tower of Joy scene is coming next week. We see the lines. We see, and now it begins, now it ends. So get hype.
I think it's possible that we see the triple fight next week, and they say we don't even see Lyanna next week at all yet. I think we will, but I hope we will. But I think it's possible that they spread it out longer. I think we'll get some serious hints and clues, but I don't think it'll be explicit this season.
I think it will be, because I think they need to make it explicit because they don't want to leave such an important detail to subtlety, and because of the timing. They're clearly doing this Tower of Joy scene basically the moment that Jon comes back. And so I think they're going to try to explain it all together.
It'll be a long flashback.
Yeah, that's true. You're right. It would be a long flashback. And again, I'm excited to see the flashback either way, because they got a real swordsman to do this, and see who they cast for these other roles. So,
Lady Gwyn, what are your thoughts?
I think that this season, yes, they have to, because it wouldn't be their style to sort of lay all this groundwork and then drag it out to another season. So I think by the end of the season, we're going to know. My opinion is not in the next episode, because they really have to re-emphasize the connection between Rhaegar and Lyanna, which they haven't done yet. They set that up kind of a little bit, at the end of the last season with Sansa and Littlefinger in the crypt, and he meant, so he gave this whole dialogue about them. So that should be in the back of people's minds, but they have to bring that back in to remind people that I don't think they're going to manage to do all that in one episode, in one flashback scene. What I'm hoping, and my call, is that the scene they do the whole Tower of Joy scene and it ends with Lyanna and a baby.
Yolkboy.
I think I agree with Lady Gwyn very much. The ending with the Lyanna had a child could be next week's kind of surprise. I know they like to rush through things, and they're on a really tight schedule, but having just met Lyanna, and also having never seen Rhaegar, I think that there's going to be more pieces of the puzzle to be thrown out through the season. And really, I hope this is what they do. I hope that it's just not all dumped on us in one rushed episode. I want a few more pieces. I want to see Rhaegar, really. And RLJ, you've got to understand these dynamics for the, to understand the whole theory.
There's also just something that just occurred to me now, is that harkening back to what we talked about at the beginning, the fact that it's the three-eyed Bloodraven is guiding these visions. He said, Bran's like, you showed me something I wanted to see. That implies there's a method to what he's showing him. There's the sequence of things he wants to show him, maybe. And if the Tower of Joy is the next one, then that really gives away that Bloodraven knows the deal with Jon. He knows who his parents are, and that's an important detail he wants to share with Bran. And if Bran's going to be leaving the tree, then that's how that news gets delivered. Bran leaves and gets to tell people this, and hopefully they believe him, or who knows what's going to happen with there. But I think it's the path is kind of laid out a bit there. It may not be that exact path, but that one works if that's the way it is.
All right, moving on. This was a question that Radio Westeros received. Will we see Ned sword ice at the Tower of Joy scene? If not, why not? And there's one answer here from the books, whether the show does it similarly. In A Suspect Martin from 2015, when asked if Ned ever used ice in battle, George pointed out that it was a great sword, very large and cumbersome. It was a ceremonial sword for beheading people more than a fighting sword, and he suggested that it was probably too heavy and clumsy to use unless you're the Mountain. This is a little contradicted in some of what he's written, but and I could see the show having ice there, but I think it's likely that it won't be, and I think it's reasonable.
I agree, and especially because they don't. If they were going to show a greatsword, why not have Arthur Dayne fight with the greatsword? And it's very clear from the trailers that this Arthur Dayne is going to be a different sort of badass. He's going to fight with 2 swords, not 1. So he's clearly not going to be wielding. Either he's not wielding Dawn, or he's dual wielding with 1 sword being Dawn and the other being some other sword, which seems kind of unlikely. So I'm guessing there's no Dawn and no ice, and just a normal, well choreographed fight that ends some way or another. So. Yeah, it doesn't seem like Dawn's going to be in the show at all. So that also means ice is pretty unlikely.
Yeah.
Especially because of what George said. I think that's pretty telling.
Yeah. I don't know if you guys have any more thoughts there.
No, I agree. I think the show just doesn't do named swords. So I think we're
okay, so let's move on to, this will be a short segment, our worry of the week.
Yes.
I'm going to guess it's probably pretty unanimously Rickon, but I'll still see if there's any other answers here. Mine's just Rickon. That's my answer.
Yeah, I'm still very worried about Rickon, and I'm not really worried about anyone else right now. I had a brief thought to be maybe worried a little bit about Varys, but that was mostly from last year. I guess I'm still worried about Dario. Nothing's changed from last week. We haven't seen him, so I'm still worried about him. But yeah, it's just all about Rickon for me right now. I think.
I'm worried about Rickon and the Kingsguard Knights at the Tower of Joy.
That's good.
Something tells me they've got trouble coming their way.
And Ned's companions too, most of them.
Lady Gwyn?
Rickon, of course. So a little bit of Theon. I don't like Theon roaming around all by himself out there. I feel a little uneasy about that. So
I feel uneasy about him possibly coming in contact with Euron. I feel like Euron would just kill him if he met him.
Right.
I really should kill him if he met him, even if he's not a man.
He's the same reason to kill Theon as he did to kill Balon. Similar reason anyway.
Exactly. So no matter which home, like we were talking about before, no matter which one he's going to, it's like, there's just danger any direction he goes. So.
All right, I think that just about wraps it up.
That wraps this episode up. A couple of closing thoughts. One thing, folks, if you have more feedback about this episode or about things you want to see us do during the season, we responded to the request to rate these episodes, so little things like that.
I said rape these episodes. Really...
Whoa there.
Yeah.
How do you do that?
No, I don't.
And so if you guys have suggestions for things you want us to do, send them our way. We'll strongly consider any suggestion. And we're definitely going to do a few of these episodes this season. Well, these are all live recordings, but we're going to open up the live recordings for people to view. We haven't decided exactly which week we're going to start doing that. We're not going to do it every week. But that'll allow people to see this a little sooner. It'll allow people to participate a bit more. Sometimes it'll be live just for people to watch. Sometimes we'll open up for the Q&A. But it's a bit early in the season for some of that. But we're going to be doing that soon. But certainly we welcome feedback on that process, things you'd like to see us do during these more interactive episodes, etc. So send us your thoughts on that, as well as any other feedback about the show, as well as our show, and the show, and our show. It's what's what. So, on behalf of everyone, thanks again for watching. Thanks again to Radio Westeros. Thanks again to everyone else. Thanks to all our supporters. And folks, we will see you next week. It's only episode 2. We've still got a lot of Game of Thrones left, so a lot of fun, lots to talk about. Looking forward to it. Valar Morghulis, Valar reread us, Valar rewatch us. All that. She thinks I'm such a nerd for saying that.
He is.
But hey, I am. That's just true. So, got to be what you are. All right, everybody. See you next week.